Hello and welcome to the Bovasin Outdoor Chronicles. My name's Jared.
And my name's Garrett.
We're two brothers who love the outdoors. We spend most of our money and all of our free time on our adventures. From working all week to playing all weekend, we find ourselves surviving the week to live on the weekends. Well, in the studio today, we have, I would say, our relative.
Yep.
By blood, back a little bit. So some of your blood's coursing through our veins, or some of our ancestors at least are.
That's right.
Ralph Saunders. Can you kind of explain the family tree there? I think you're cousins to our grandmother. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's correct. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So your parents were, or your dad, was it your dad or mom that was?
It was my dad, Glenn, and he was the firstborn of the family. And Sharon, that's my cousin. She was the daughter of the mother was named Joy.
Joy. Yep. Grandma Joy. Okay. Yeah. Oh, man. So, oh, man.
That's my catchphrase.
We have kind of started our own experience in the backcountry. It started in a couple of different mountain ranges, but we've since spent quite a bit of time in the Beartooths. And I've met you a few times briefly at Grandma's house, but your kind of legend precedes you. I kind of feel like you've put boots all over the top and bottom and around the Beartooths as somebody who knows a lot about it. In fact, the mountain goat hunt we went on a few years ago, we actually used your map to navigate when we were up there. And there was something really, really cool about that. The fact that I have a family member that
made this map that's guiding me through this wilderness.
Yeah. And it was like a survival challenge up there because we'd never done anything quite like that. It was like late October. We backpacked in. We ended up doing 55 miles on foot in over 7 days. And your map was there the whole time, guiding us through it.
Well, we should have had a little more information of that cliffy area.
Yeah, we should have.
I do remember at one point I'm like, I don't know if Ralph knows what he's talking about. I can't find this trail anywhere.
I have no idea where this trail's at.
Trail? What trail? That little path that's buried under the snow.
But even in preparation for that goat hunt, we went with a couple of people through work.
Yes. Yep, we did. And they're like talking about Ralph Saunders, and I said, "Yeah, we're related to Ralph." And they're like,
they
no
lit up.
way.
Yeah.
They just lit up. They're like, we met him in the backcountry a few times, and he was up there. He had his altimeter and a thermometer and a compass is what and he was up there doing his maps, and he gave us a ton of good pointers when we were up there. So I kind of a local celebrity here. I'm blushing a little bit.
Well, I don't know quite what to say about being a celebrity, but I've encountered a few people in the hills, and back in the days when GPS wasn't even known or didn't even exist, and those other tools were kind of handy.
Yeah.
And you did want to have that paper map with you, and I really appreciate you saying all those kind words about the maps, because to me, maps are my life.
Mm-hmm.
My life from one time or another. I mean, I've got so many maps I can't keep them in the house. Selby's stores, about 90% of my maps or more on pallets. I've got probably on pallets up there. He's probably got 35,000 of my maps.
Really?
Dating way back to even some of the first houses in the LA area. I've got maps that far back, and then goes all the way to the East Coast, and a lot of early old maps. And so it's real fun. But I spend more of my time working on my own maps that I make myself rather than looking at others. But it's just something that's been a part of my life for way over 50 years, 60 years.
So, Ralph, fill us in. How did you get your start, mountaineering, going kind of being a mountain man, if you will, living up there? And not only that, then you started to map it. So how'd you get your start?
Well, my dad was my big leader.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I had to follow him. And then, of course, my brother was the same way. So between the two of us, we just loved the mountains and the backcountry. And so without him, I probably never would have developed, as fast. But we also had friends along the way that also enjoyed the backcountry. And our old baseball coach was a backcountry gentleman, and he used to take us back up, in the upper country and camp, and it was just a blast.
So you started out, as a kid, you were up there. Your dad took you up there. Did you do some trapping up there? What was your dad doing up there? Scenic stuff? What,
Well, a little bit of both, but my dad did trap when he was younger in the Beartooths, trap marten, and then my brother, he kind of came along in that same line. I was not a trapper. I think I did trap a bobcat or two that was around the house when they shouldn't have been, and so we learned to throw a trap out or two, but it wasn't my real thing. But it was my brother's, and he spent hundreds of days solo himself in the Beartooths trapping marten, just like my dad did. So he was more or less following in that particular route. But my dad was the fisherman of the group. I mean, we would go to the lakes. In fact, you mentioned a lake where you got goat up there.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in there with an uncle and cousins, and we were all trying to catch a fish. We were doing our best. And Dad was just catching them and throwing them back, catching them and throwing them back. So he just had a knack.
Yeah.
He just knew how to catch a fish and all we could do was try.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So your dad was what years was this? How long has your family been involved in the Beartooth?
Oh, I'd say probably I can remember in the late 40s that we would camp in little tents. And then by the 50s, we started spreading out a little further and then going back into the backcountry more. And I think it was not until like 1956 that we actually went as far as Cook City and then went back in the backcountry from there. And areas that there was no trails at the time. That there are main trails now, and there was no trails there then. So you just had to kind of make your own way.
Untouched.
Man, that's amazing. So your brother kind of followed your dad's footsteps on the trapping, and that's Bruce, correct?
That's Bruce.
Mm-hmm. Now you went more the map route, or when did you start making maps, or when did it click that you're like... Because do you go to school for it? I don't even know how one starts making maps.
Well, I worked for an engineering company at the time, and working and developing maps was something that was part of our business. And the main thing was actually mapping irrigation and water rights issues. And so I had a little background in actually how to develop a map to some extent, but we also had professional cartographers there that actually did most of the actual making of the maps. I just generated the information for them, and but we loved the backcountry. And you talk about that area where you actually harvested that goat. Well, right over the drainage, you're talking about that and the lakes and the headwaters of that drainage. I can remember Dad and I going to every lake in that area to see what was in them. And so we had probably traversed hundreds of those lakes up there. And we knew exactly what was in all of those lakes. But I'll tell you right now, unless you were a relative or a very close friend, we were not going to tell you one thing. It was like a secret. We developed it for our own selves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that we, it wasn't very godly to be that way. And so one night, my brother, we were bringing out a sheep that he had harvested, and we were on this plateau, and it got dark on us, and after a few hours, our flashlights went dark, and here we were in 30-mile-an-hour wind, snowing hard, 10 degrees, and we couldn't go anywhere because you couldn't see anything. And so we just laid down, the three of us, right on that, up on top of that ridge, that plateau, and spending the night, freezing our you-know-what's off. and I had a calling. I heard a voice. And it said, "You need to share your information. You should not be coveting all that you know about these mountains and all this great fishery." And I said, I was just shocked.
Mm-hmm.
I my back shivered, my hair stood up. This voice, who is telling me this? I have never used the word covet in my life. And I said, how can I do this? My feet, I think they're frozen. I don't think I'll ever walk. He says, I will take care of your feet. And I said, well, how do you want me to do this? No response. And I didn't know what to think. And so when I got back, I talked to my granddad, who was a great book reader. And he says, write a book. I says, no, Granddad, I'm not an author. I says, I know how to make maps. Make a map. So, 1983, I started making maps of the Beartooth, and I actually had to draw and ink the maps themselves. And with the assistance of some technical people from the U.S. Geological Survey and other professional cartographers, I was able to then generate a product, had it published, and so now, 41 years later, we're still selling maps.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh.
I'm
How?
almost speechless. I mean, you're in that situation where stuff went sideways and you're freezing, and to have that
I'll
experience to where
take care
kinda
of your
like-
feet. Don't worry, I'll take care of your feet.
In a soft, very distinctive voice. And I just jerked my head to the sides and looked around and know who is telling me this. It's not the voice of my friend or my brother. Who? And I didn't know what to think. So I followed suit with what I felt like I could do to respond to that. And they have done well, but at the same time, people have criticized me for producing information that makes information available
Mm-hmm.
as to what they can get, where, and how to get there. Because I spent hundreds of hours hiking off-trail, 2 lakes, with paths or a little route that wasn't even very decipherable, but the calling was there. Help somebody. And it's been rewarding, but at the same time, I always hated to see the country overused also.
Mm-hmm. We talk about that quite a bit. Tragedy to commons, where you got a good thing. Well, everybody wants to see the good thing, and when everybody's there, it ruins the good thing, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's something we struggle with every aspect of our podcast is we try to play that line.
Or I want you to come along with me and I want you to have this much, but maybe not exactly where I'm doing it because I don't want it to get ruined. I think it's
for other people that are at the same spot, word gets out and 10 more people show up to this spot, you know, not only is it ruined for us, but everybody else that's there. So I know exactly what you mean.
I really enjoyed the real backcountry, off the trail, off the path, in lakes and areas. You spend 3 days and don't see anybody. But if it's too advertised, then it very well can be overused. And that's been my concern with respect to the maps. But it's never been a money thing.
Mm-hmm.
I never, ever intended to make a lot of money off of them. It was more or less a calling. It's told me to not covet it, to share the information, find out what you can, and share. And so I feel the calling was the most important thing, and not just concerned about the overuse.
I will say your map helped us for 7 days when we were up there, and we had never been that far before. We'd been around the bottom a little bit, but
it was definitely eye-opening to the scale of these mountains, and then even like navigating in them. Like now with phone GPS, you know, they have aerial imagery. It's pretty easy to I'm right here. But what we experienced when we were there, it's like, well, now there's so many rolls that I don't have a point of reference. I'm kind of lost, right?
Yeah, and also the aerial ones. And if you've ever looked at these GPS, if you look close enough, it shows a trail here, but if you zoom in, the picture of the trail's over here. So if you stay on the line of the trail, what I think helped us a lot, we had that paper map out all the time. And it was like the GPS was more of like a quick reference. Like, hey, we're on the right side of this peak or right side of this mountain. Where the map was like, okay, how do we get from here to where we want to go? You know, and really
following elevation lines a lot. I remember with the map.
Yeah, and looking for trails
But I mean, you said your favorites like the backcountry. How do you navigate in that? What tools do you use?
Yeah, before the GPS, before the aerial photos of everything, or satellite photos.
And navigation in that particular country, everybody is different. I've encountered people that had difficulty even when it seemed like it should have been straightforward. And navigation has been something that I started so young with my dad that it seemed like it came second nature to be able to orient myself. But when I taught GPS classes to search and rescue folks in different counties, and I told them that, yes, that GPS is a very nice tool, but it is only a tool, and that you need to develop your instincts and your knowledge of being able to navigate basically without a GPS. And that's when that hard copy map is extremely valuable. But at the same time, you should orient yourself to your terrain and being able to know exactly what's in front of you, behind you, to the side, and keep track of exactly where you're at all times. So when that storm comes and you can't see more than 20 feet, that you don't have to panic, that you'll be able to find your way back out, even if you had to take a shortcut, that you would be able to orient yourself, but use the other tools. Before GPS, of course, that compass, absolutely important. And the barometric altimeter, and how to use a barometric altimeter. A lot of people was not aware of the value of a barometric altimeter. And that tool was used almost on a daily, regular, hourly basis when I was in the backcountry, where there was no paths or anything but just a route to something. And so if you needed to learn those kinds of tools and to be able to assist you. But again, it takes training to be able to do that.
So obviously I understand the premise of a compass, but can you kind of elaborate on the altimeter, what you use that for in the backcountry and why that was such a useful tool for you?
When I was surveying the lakes, there was, like I said, a lot of those lakes had no trail or no path to them. You were on your own to find it. And so I had a base map to work off of that had contour intervals on it. And if you were able to go ahead and calibrate that at given points and reset it to the actual elevation, when you got to a particular location or not, if you weren't sure where you were at, you could look at your contour interval. And then you'd be able to see if your elevation that you have on your altimeter matches that elevation, or maybe you are lost and that you are not where you're supposed to be or where you think you are. And so you had to continue to calibrate that at every opportunity. At swales, contour, you could then recalibrate it at a given location where you can get it within 40 feet and maintain that. And so if you're going up hillsides and down hillsides and around, there's nothing to calibrate it to. But the barometric altimeter changes throughout the day on a regular basis. And so you need to calibrate as often as you possibly can. When you can get to a positive location, you can reset your altimeter. And then that would help then be able to orient yourself where you're at in the backcountry. Unfortunately, Lewis and Clark didn't have that, but they did have a really good compass, and they knew how to use it. And I mapped basically the same way that they did when I was going into the backcountry, of using the compass for being able to get a direction, maintain myself and, with the terrain.
I had a very unique experience this last year when we were archery hunting elk on the Idaho border. We were coming out at dark, and I've been lost a handful of times, very few times where, and I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but you get somewhere and you go, oh, I thought this trail was going to be here, or I thought this rock was going to be here, and it's not, and you get that pit in your stomach. Well, but most of the time I have a very good sense of, like, I probably can't, without a compass, I probably can't say that's north, but I can say the truck's over there or our camp's over there. You know, I kind of, in reference to other things, I'm pretty good. Well, we come walking out at dark, and at first the moon was out, and then the moon went away, and we were walking in thick timber, deadfall timber, and we're coming out, and I think we walked by the same tree like 2 or 3 times. We couldn't figure it out. And finally what I ended up doing was, on my phone or my GPS app, I would hit a point. I'd drop a waypoint, and I'd walk a bunch, and I'd drop another waypoint, and I'd look. and I'd walk a bunch and drop another waypoint. And if I started to curve, I would correct myself until we got out of this chunk of timber. But I couldn't figure out why. I knew where our camp was. I couldn't figure out why I kept walking in circles. And then it occurred to me when the moon went behind the clouds and it was dark. I got a headlight on. All I could see was trees, and subconsciously I must have been orienting myself to where the moon was and being able to walk a straight line to that. But when that went away, I was getting turned around and not really realizing it, which was it was a learning experience for me. And I'm glad we were only like a quarter mile away from camp when that happened, but still it was humbling, and I learned a lot and went, hey, look, if there's not something I can orient myself to, even if it's the moon or the sun that I'm doing, I really need to pay attention, to how we're walking and stuff. We eventually got out, but it was like we were caught in a maze for a while.
Yeah, like almost like a bad movie, walking by the same tree.
Gosh.
Well, and it is so interesting that when you said that you had the instinct, or if that's the right word, but to go in a circle. And a lot of people that have never been in that situation really doesn't orient to that as to how or why that could actually be. I can remember one time a friend of mine, we decided that we wanted to go up to a place where my uncle and my dad were cutting poles. And so we were going to run up there. There was a cabin up there. Well, it was snowing hard, and you couldn't see very good. And we didn't get very far before all of a sudden the pickup stalled on us because it was 2 feet of snow. And so I do know that there was an old gentleman that lived not too far from there. And I thought, well, we'll just cut across and we'll go down to his house. And I had my head kind of, at an angle to try to protect yourself from that blizzard that was happening and everything. And then we went by something that was identifiable. And we just kept on going and kept on going. We kept on going. We kept on going. And all of a sudden, there it was again. And we were on a flat land, no timbers. It was in flat country. I had gone in a circle. I thought, that wasn't the smartest thing to do. So we followed our tracks back to the pickup and took the road down and around and came in. And we got there. But I found out very early on that could actually happen. And it was not like miles and miles of country.
No.
It was in a reasonable area. How did I ever in the world go
in a circle?
And after working with, even before I had GPS, with my dad, he helped me in learning to orient and to train and develop my skills to be able to operate without a map or a GPS or any other tool. And it was in the 1970s, a long time before GPS, never even heard the term. And a friend of mine had harvested a sheep, and we spent quite a bit of time getting that sheep all ready to pack. And we realized that we were a couple miles from camp. And we started getting dark, and all of a sudden we realized we didn't put in our flashlights. And there was no trail. And all of a sudden it started getting where the darker and darker and darker, and it was the darkest night. I swear I felt like we were in a cave. I couldn't see my hand in front of me. I couldn't see him. When I knew he was within reach of me, I couldn't see him. And here we were out in that country. And I also left my matches at camp. I thought, how in the world, if I die up here, my dad are going to say, I thought I trained you better than that. And so we knew we were 2 miles from camp. And so I examined the terrain and everything just as much as I possibly could for several minutes before it got dark. And so we started in the direction of the camp. And we maneuvered over, and we knew that there would be a trail for a certain point if we hit that. And we did. And then we had to leave that. And then we had to work our way around. And I'm having so much trouble with the branches that it was dry and it was thick. And so I had to close my eyes and walk and orient myself with the feeling of where I was at. And we walked at 11 o'clock, and that was pretty slow walking.
I bet.
At 11 o'clock, I had my walking stick that I had broke from a tree to kind of help protect myself on my face. And I tapped around, and there I found the tent. We walked to it completely, almost blindfolded, across terrains, multiple drainages and around, and come out at the tent. So there is also an assistant into your own brain. There's somebody helping you from up above. Somebody is protecting you. And interestingly enough, it was but a few years later when I got the calling, I think, from that same person. They're there. And there's something more important than your own abilities to do whatever you can do in your life. You've got to be a believer.
I don't know what to say after that.
I mean, even when you're walking in the dark, my personal experience is everything's bigger. And like, even like you're walking up a slight hill, it's like, well, this hill seems longer than it should be. You know, like in the daylight, your eyes kind of deceive you. That's an incredible story.
Or just even, we have a cousin who lives in California, and we'll pick on her because she lives in California. And, you know, we don't like those Californians here too much. But one thing she did say is she wasn't afraid of anything. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of anything. And I told her, I said, all right, you know, I'm definitely afraid of a few things. Heights, for one. Don't like heights. But I said, it's a different type of feeling you get when you're in the woods alone and it gets dark. And it's not, there's almost something primitive about it. Something in your lizard brain. Like Garrett said, the hills get bigger. Seems like the trees get darker. The noises get scarier. And you really have to focus and not let that come to the front of your mind, you know. It helps when you have people. I'm thinking of one instance. We were walking and we decided to split up, and it was about 1.5 miles to the road, maybe 2 miles. And before we split up, we had a talk like, okay, it's light out. We're going to split up, and it's going to get dark, and you're going to be by yourself until we see each other back on the road, hopefully. And
I remember I was like, yeah, you know, I don't care.
You blew it off. We're fine. Yeah. We're fine.
As soon as I got by myself and in the dark, it was like, I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta find the road, please.
Well, in the year before that, I summited a peak by myself. Nobody wanted to go with me. So I went and summited this peak. Well, 3/4 the way up, I'm still getting my feet under me for hiking and backcountry stuff. And about 3/4 the way up, I was out of water. And I didn't bring anything to really, well, I had a life straw is what I had. But I was up so high, there wasn't a lot of water, right? So I ended up summiting and coming back down the other side. I did find a little spring or creek coming out, and it was kind of gross. I just had a life straw, but I had my empty water bladder. So to filter the water, I would suck it through my straw and then spit it in the bag until I filled up my bag, you know? But I remember coming down that mountain, and it was really cool at dark sunset, but it gets dark, and in this canyon to my right, I heard a bear roar, like, and it echoes, right? So who knows? It wasn't close, but it was enough. I was just like, oh my God. My first time out, it's dark. I'm at least 3 miles in. And I remember coming down, and after that growl, I took my pistol out, and I'm kind of carrying it like, oh my God. And then I turn the corner of a tree, and there's an eye right there. And I'm like, oh my God. And it turns really quick, and it was a chipmunk. Okay. But it scared the crap out of me. I about blew this little thing away. But when I turned the corner of this kind of boulder and came around, the depth perception was off with just because my headlight, that's all I had. And I thought it was like a bear in the timber, but it was a chipmunk on this little stub of a branch right in front of my face. But I could just, like, his eye was just like, it just freaked me out so
Big old
bad.
eye.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so after that trip, I finally popped out. I was super dehydrated, scared. I was scared. I was glad to hit the road. Well, a few years later, we went to split up, and that's when I told him, I'm like, hey, we're going to be walking out in the dark. It scared the hell out of me last time. Like, just know that.
Well, you can always have those kinds of experiences. My brother and I were hunting, and it was, of course, we had a couple miles to go, and so we were walking on a trail, and we were kind of leaning underneath this great big tree, pine tree, and we were leaning over, and about that time, right immediately above us in that tree was a mountain lion let out with a huge scream. And I think we almost both lost it in our pants. I mean, to tell you, that was the closest I ever come to have to clean them in the hills. And another time, almost in the same area up another ridge, some of us would go up ahead of time and getting set up, and then some of us would leave later. And then so we'd work until we had pushed game to one another. And I was walking up this ridge. It was, I don't know, it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, because I know it was going to take me 4 or 5 hours to get where I wanted to get in the dark. And so it was moonlight. I could see where I was at. I knew the country, and I could see well enough, but it was dark, relatively so. And I was the same way. I leaned underneath this tree, kind of like, and about that time, right underneath between my legs, a blue grouse flew out, and their noise that they make was just absolutely. I thought I was going to do it again. Those little things make you sit down and think.
Yeah. That's funny as hell.
And it's funny, but at the same time, it's
not at that split
second. It's not funny.
I mean, there's something about being in the mountains and then having those feelings, right? Because you feel alone, but you also kind of feel alive. Because especially when it gets dark, your adrenaline and you feel like everything's kind of heightened.
Yeah, one of our friends, I think, said it very well. Talked about there's 2 different types of fun. And there's the fun when you go to the bar or the club or bowling, and it's fun. And when you talk about it, you're like, oh yeah, it was fun bowling. And then there's a type of fun that is not fun until you are remembering it, it's like during it sucked.
Yeah.
And it was not fun.
No. Moments afterwards, you wanted to really chuckle.
Yeah.
I mean, when I watched that little bird just disappear, and everything, I was really chuckling. But I'll tell you what, I was still trying to catch my breath too. So there's 2 parts of fun. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with all the traveling you've done in the Beartooths, how have you been with the grizzlies? Have you had any encounters or ran into many?
I've never had an actual encounter with a grizzly. I did have an encounter with a black bear. It was a very reddish black bear, and I would guess to say it was probably just a 2-year-old. It wasn't a real big bear, but it was by itself. And I encountered him at maybe 30, 40 yards. And so I didn't think much about it, but I had bear spray with me. And so I just held it right, pointed right at him. I said, now listen, you behave yourself, and I'm no threat now, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, he just went at me so fast that I didn't even have time to even react that it was even happening. He was just bingo. He was in my face from 30 yards, just whammo. And I had the bear spray in my hand, and I didn't even have time to even hit it because it was happening so quick I didn't even know to even do anything. But I tightened up. It was a natural reaction to tighten up, and the bear spray went out accidentally, more than on purpose, and it hit him perfectly. And he went right beside me and kept on going. And I never really, ever really felt like it was probably a threat, because I think it, still to this day, I think it was like a false charge kind of a thing. I don't think that I really was in that kind of danger, but I might have been. I don't know. But it was.
You didn't track him down and ask him?
No,
No?
I let him go. I let him go. And the only other grizzly that I've been close to was about 50 yards away. And he saw me and I saw him. And I just sat right there. All I had as a weapon was a fishing pole. Not exactly a good weapon,
No.
And so I just looked at him and just waited. Never moved, never did nothing. And all of a sudden he just kind of turned around and disappeared on me. And I thought, goodbye, thank you. And my brother had a little closer call with a grizzly. And he was with a friend. Actually, he's a game warden. And my brother didn't have a license at that particular moment, but he was carrying the gun anyway. And the game warden was below him. And all of a sudden, he started going down to him. And he looked to the right, and at about 10 yards, here's an actual adult grizzly. And she looked at him, and then all of a sudden he heard something to the left, and here was a little cub. He was right between the two of them. And so he loaded his gun, and she was right beside a cliff, about 30 feet from him. And so he went ahead and blasted into the cliff beside the bear about 5 or 10 feet, just to make the noise and to shock the bear. She never even flinched.
Oh my God.
And so he loaded another one, and about that time that little cub ran right beside him, right to Mama. And they turned around and went the opposite direction. And then the game warden shows up. He says, "What were you shooting at?" You don't have a license, my young man. And so he told her the story, and so he kind of thought, okay, I guess that's fine.
Oh my gosh. Thank God, we've never really had a big bear scare. We've bumped a few bears here and there, but nothing, knock on wood, thank God. But now they're seeing those grizzlies all over the state, so I think there's I've hiked in some woods that there's not supposed to be grizzlies in, and I got pictures of scratches on trees way bigger than my hand.
Yep.
And, I mean, it could have been a huge black bear, but
Yep.
And then I talked to the biologist in that area, and they're like, well, this is what he told me. He said, I'm not going to say there's bears there, but I'm also not going to tell you there's not grizzlies there.
Yep. Well, they're more and more populated than they used to be, and they're continuing to grow. And a few years ago, my brother and I were heading into the backcountry, and we had gone through this kind of a wet, muddy area. We were trying to walk around it and stuff. My brother was 50 feet ahead of me, And then about the time that I was finding my way around that mud, all of a sudden I saw what looked like a big bear track with the huge claws on it. And all of a sudden the mud kind of sunk in on it. So
It was that fresh.
we knew that it was just, he had just moved, ahead of us. And I hollered at my brother. And we were just kind of like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, And all we had was fishing poles again. and so we never heard the bear or saw the bear or nothing. So he had seen or heard us and moved out. And all we saw was the remains of that track falling in. So we knew he was close, but we were blessed.
Man. You've probably forgotten way more than I know up in those mountains.
I definitely have. As I was coming here, I thought, what will I even remember?
Oh, that's pretty good.
So what did you do for like water filters and stuff? Because I know now there's all this high tech gear and stuff. But back in the day, what was your gear setup?
Well, many years ago, we drank the water. That was it. We never thought anything different. And then eventually by the 70s, we started using filters. And one time I just had a filter that was nothing more than just a straw itself, and it was the filter, and you could drink right out of it. Other times we've got the filters, you fill up the jar, and then you put that in there and it filter it out. So I think in the backcountry, I think no matter where you're at, I think it's smart to have filters and use filters.
Back in the day when you didn't use filters, did anybody ever get sick?
There was some drainages that we knew that were worse than others. And so you had a little experience from other people, telling you where there would be some good water and where there wouldn't be. So that was, about all you went by. Mm-hmm. 20 years before water filters we even knew they existed.
I mean, I've drank quite a bit of water without a filter. I go back and forth on it. If I can see it bubbling straight out of the ground, I usually feel like I'm safe. I don't normally drink out of just a creek, but if I got something just running out of the side of the mountain.
And you run counter a lot of those like that it just breaks right out of the ground fresh right there. And I felt like, you could put your cup down and drink and not worry about it. But if you're in lakes and
mm-hmm.
major streams and stuff, should be using it.
Should be using a filter.
And then what about like backpack, pants? What
was, now everything's so high tech. We got these incredible fibers, incredible gear, sealers, waterproofers. Like Garrett and I talk about all the time, that backcountry goat hunt we went on was made possible with our inexperience by some of our gear. Helped out a ton,
Oh, I hear you. Gear has really, over the years, has really improved. Not only your clothing, because I can remember going up into the backcountry when I was a kid, you just wore whatever you wore when you were feeding cows. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have any special gear. You just, that's all you had. And then as time went, the clothing was starting to develop. The shoes were developing, and not only that, but the packs themselves. And I think I've gone through countless packs. In fact, I have given some of my packs away to search and rescue people because, there's no need to have all of those sitting in the basement anymore. But, and I can remember the food that we ate.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we cooked like we did right in our restaurant. I mean, in our home, kitchen
Yeah.
and stuff.
No freeze-dried
No,
meals that you
no.
add hot water
Right,
to, and
right.
you have lasagna
Yeah.
on top of the mountain.
But we got to where that we could actually have French toast, eggs in the morning, and in the backcountry, be there for 5 days, and eat good meals. Even maybe I'd want some fruit, even in a can, and take it with me and have a little can of fresh fruit just because of the taste. But you had to be careful how much of that you took. But I got to where that I could be in the backcountry doing my mapping, bringing my tools with me, and 5 days with somewhere between a 30 and a 33-pound pack.
I'm going to have
total
to
weight.
pick your brain on that.
Total weight.
30 pounds.
30 to 35, yeah.
And
30 to
solid
33.
food.
And solid
Very
food.
rarely I would ever, in the last 20 years that I was backpacking, did I ever have over a 33-pound pack.
And that's tent and
No.
everything?
Yes. Tent, sleeping bag, pad, everything that you would want, and eat very well. But at the same time, we did eat a lot of fish. And so we depended on, if we would have had to have a full meal to cook every meal, we couldn't have gone in for that kind of weight. And so in hunting season, that's not a hunting season kind of a pack.
Okay.
That is more for the summer when you are fishing and you're going in the backcountry where you depended on
What you were catching somewhere.
you catch a lot of food that you eat. Absolutely. You never could go in with that kind of weight.
So what was your hunting weight then, do you think?
Hunting weight would probably, it would push, if you're going to be in there for 4 or 5 days, it would push 38 to 40 pounds.
That's still pretty good though.
And then your rifle and your binoculars on the top of that, of
Mhm.
course. Yes.
So, ate a lot of fish. Do you have a favorite fish that you like more than others, or are they kind of all the same?
Everybody's got favorites, and the old pink-meated fish, cutthroats and stuff are always, and we know which lakes would produce those, and so those were always, we'd go for those.
You like stop
Brook
at the
trout.
grocery store.
Brook trout were almost always good in almost all lakes. Brook trout were always tasty no matter what. But now a rainbow or even a cutthroat wouldn't necessarily depend on where you're at be as good a taste as they are in other lakes. So you got to where you knew which ones would have better taste. And if I have some friends coming that was going to be wanting some fish, then I'd head to the hills and go up in a certain specific lake because I knew that the fish in that lake would be better tasting. So I'd bring them back out so you could have the best fish for your friend when you were cooking.
Do you ever make a fish cooking map? Where to find the best brook trout to cook?
No.
When you cooking the fish, are you cooking them on the fire in tinfoil? Did you bring butter or lemon? Was
Yeah.
there a...
What's the Ralph Saunders way to cook a fish in the backcountry?
My dad always had tinfoil, and then we would fillet them, put the fillets in there, and add the butter in it, roll it up, put it in there, and let it cook and bring it out and eat it. It's pretty hard to beat. He was a great filleter, and but at the same time, we would carry sometime a little pan, and that pan could be used. And I got to where I used that more than I did tinfoil over the time, because that would always then to be able to take that those eggs and break them up and work your bread into those and bake that right on the pan and everything, and that was always a good breakfast like that. And that's where powdered eggs is not that bad when it comes to doing that. And so we use powdered eggs rather than real eggs, because I've used the real eggs, but sometimes they'd end up being a mess because they'd break on you. So we got to where we experimented with the dried eggs. We add the water to it and stir it up and everything, and then mix the bread with it, and put it on there, and always took bacon with it too. We always brought that freeze-dried dried bacon. That all you have to do is just warm it up. It's not like we'd have a lot of grease, and so we got real used to putting 2 or 3 strips of bacon in there with it, and so you'd have a pretty good breakfast with it like that, and not that much weight. It would be pretty convenient.
That sounds a lot better than what we do. It's always like some
Did.
I'm
kind of getting
more nuanced.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Garrett won't eat tuna to this day. Because on that 5 or 7 day trip we did in the backcountry, I researched a lot, and it was all about calories, right? I'm like, we need to be as light as we can, but have the most calories. It's not about tasting good. It's just about not dying, right? And so we did. They sell at the grocery store. They're like a pack like this big of tuna, right? And then we took Fritos, chips, and we crushed those up and made a powder out of them, really, because they take up less space. You could crunch them up. So every day we were eating tuna or salmon. We had a few packs of salmon, but tuna and Fritos. And then he got so sick of it up there that
my issue is I'm at the grocery store and it's like, oh, ranch flavored tuna? That sounds good. Barbecue flavored tuna? That sounds good.
Why not?
And by the end of the trip, it was just like, I couldn't even smell it. It was just no more.
Not good. So this last, year or 2? No, it was last year. It's kind of when I started it. Because that's when I started my diet. I quit eating a lot of bad stuff. Tried to be healthier. They had the freeze-dried food where you put hot water in and it cooks and blah, 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 or rehydrates. Well, I couldn't eat that because of the diet I was on. So what I did is I went to the grocery store and I bought a chuck steak that was on sale for like $1.99 a pound, right? They were clearing it out. I cut it up into strips, and they were chuck steaks, just like marbled with fat, or chuck roast is what it was. I cut that up and I put it in the oven and I just cooked it slow until it turned into like jerky, but it kind of absorbed all that fat in it as well, and I threw those in little Ziploc baggies, and then I took a few like chives out of the garden in the Ziploc bag. What else did I?
Beans? Or was it peas?
Oh no, you're right. I had green beans. I brought a bag of like green beans, fresh green beans. And then when I got up on the mountain, I filled up my little jet boil sponsorship. No, my little jet boil. I threw those chunks of meat in, the green beans in, the chives, and there was one other ingredient. I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I might have brought a bouillon cube, like beef bouillon. And I threw that in there and I just let it like warm up, and the meat got tender again and the grease came out of the meat. And it made a pretty good stew.
Really good.
Yeah.
And I remember you and Aaron at the time were like, can I have some of that?
Yeah.
But that's kind of been, I think I'll do that more. I enjoyed it more, and not as much as your eggs and fish and bacon and stuff. We just ate dinner and you're making me hungry again. So I did do a little bit of kind of reading on you, Ralph, because you have lived quite an incredible life. Could you tell me a little bit about John Coulter?
John Coulter. Wow, what a man. I just can't hardly imagine how he could, with a 30-pound pack, to go for up to 60 days in the mountains and survive. He was amazing. I did a Oh, I think I did it. Oh, it was probably somewhere close to 2 years of study on him, and many, many hours a day, following his life and through his trek through Yellowstone Park and where he went and mapping his route. And the more I worked on it, the more amazing I felt that he really was. I still believe that he had assistance along the way, and I think he did encounter some natives, or otherwise I don't think he could have gotten where he did, or why he would have gone where he did. But it was amazing how he came back and then survived, and through all of his experiences and his run for life out of the Three Forks country, when Potts was with him, and of course he got killed, and because he panicked, and John did not, and that cost him Potts his life. But he was given the chance, and because of his amazing endurance and ability to run, he survived. And there is only one real place. We know within 200 yards of probably where it started. And there is one place within a matter of 50 feet that we know where he spent one night. And it's really neat to be able to study all of that based on all of the information that came out from people that he talked with and what he explained. And it was on site with a gentleman by the name of Thomas. And he was on site with him and told him where it was at, and the stuff that he wrote up on it just was absolutely amazing as to be able to how to actually locate where some of that actually happened. And there was a peak north of Bozeman called Ross Peak, and that's where he spent one of his nights, the first night. And then he, of course, after that, headed for the fort. You can call it Manuel Lisa's Fort, Raymond, or other different names. But it took him several days to get there. But he did it with, presumably to be what they said was naked and prickly pears, and to run through that country and to survive. He had to be an extremely tough man.
So for people that don't know who John Coulter is, what's kind of the short version of his story?
Well, John Coulter, of course, he got most of his fame either through his run, but he was a part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was one of the first people that was picked up. I think it was like October of 1803. And because of his knowledge and capability. And so he went all the way through on the expedition until he got back in the vicinity of Mandan in 1806. And I think it was something like August or so when he encountered a couple of guys that were coming up the river in boats, and he said, I want to go with those guys. And so they let him go. And I was the only one out of the entire expedition that they let go. Everybody else had to stay with him, but he was respected enough, they let him go. And so then he spent a winter with these folks, and then eventually come back and spent more time in the Three Forks area, and that's when he had the run for life.
And what's the run for life?
They were in two separate boats, and they were canoeing up above Three Forks at a narrows. And all of a sudden, several hundred warriors showed up, and assumedly to be Blackfeet, and they waved him to come to shore. They came to shore, except Potts would not come all the way. He panicked, raised his gun, and they filled him full of arrows. And then they brought his body in and then butchered it right there in front of John Coulter. And they said, apparently they were going to give you a chance for your life. And they felt like more than likely they were going to have fun as to who could go kill him. And so they gave him a little bit of a head start. And they said, go. And so he they had stripped him naked. And so that was going to be not that easy in the terrain, and well as the type of vegetation, like the prickly pear and stuff that he was going to be running through.
And even the sagebrush.
And the sagebrush and everything.
It's just, it's not a...
And so he outdistanced them, except for one man. And that one man got close enough, and just to make a long story short, he was able to kill that man with his own spear. And then he also had, according to Thomas's information, he had that spear and a blanket. That's just his. And there's 3 accounts. He's the only one that said that, so they don't know positively. But anyway, so at that point, he dove into the river and then found a hiding place, and then waited until all the screaming from the natives had stopped. And then he got out of the river, swam down the river a ways, and then went up the Gallatin towards Bozeman, then headed off of that and headed towards Ross Peak and Sacagawea Peak up there, and stayed on top of Sacagawea Peak for the night. And he got there actually almost at daylight when he got there, and stayed there during the day. And then at night, then he descended Ross Peak and headed east towards the fort. So that was his so-called run for life. He had another experience later on when he was with the Crows, and he was actually shot. And he went back to the fort, survived, and then had another close call experience, and finally decided in 1810 that he was done with this. He's going home. He went back to St. Louis, and it was in about 1807 when they first got up there with Manuel Lisa, and he was going to go out and see if he could try to bring the natives in to trade. They were going to have, that was a trading fort. And so anyway, he went ahead and went out to find the natives to trade, and then he spent the entire winter and didn't get back till spring. And so that's when he made his big trek through Yellowstone Park, went all the way down and around, and supposedly by himself, but I feel he had a native with him, based on where he went and what he was doing, what was going on, I think.
And why do you, what is some things that make you think that he had a native with him?
I don't think he could have gone. Actually, he went all the way up past Cody and around the mountains into the wind, and then up over into the Green River drainage. And there was natives over there. That was his goal, was to bring natives. And he wouldn't have gone over there, wouldn't have known there would have been natives over there if it wouldn't have been for the other Crow Indians and stuff that he ran across that probably said, well, let's go over there if you want to get them. Otherwise, I don't think why in the world would he have gone to some of the places that he did.
It was like too much of a lucky guess.
Exactly.
Is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And then you mentioned, within 50 feet where he spent the night on Ross Peak.
Right on top of Ross Peak. It's a pretty small point.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of area, but there is kind of 2 high points on it. You see it from a distance, it looks like one, but you get up there and there's kind of a little swale in the top of it. And I think he went up there and laid down on that grass. There's actually some grass up there on top of that peak. You can't see it. You wouldn't even think it would be there, but there is. And I climbed that peak when I was in freshman in college, just for the heck of it one time, as it looked impressive to me. So I just went up there and got familiar with it. Never even knew John Coulter at the time, or about him. I mean,
Little did you know you're standing in his footsteps.
So yeah, and then that information kind of helped me understand how he got up there and how he would have been safe. because they couldn't have seen him unless they'd have got all the way up there on top of it, you know. So it's really a neat area.
So you're also part of, you do a lot of community outreach. It seems like you're a part of a few different things. You work a lot on Lewis and Clark. Can you tell me what Our Montana Inc. is?
Montana Inc.
Yeah, it said you were a board member of it. Board member of Our Montana.
Our Montana.
Our Montana. Yep.
That. Yes, I've worked with those folks for I don't know how many years now. Yes, and I'm involved with them right now, mapping the Bozeman Trail.
Yeah, it says you mapped quite a bit of the Bozeman Trail.
Yes, and we're in the process of doing that right now and writing up the report on it. And it's very interesting to see exactly where they went and actually even finding old tracks or where they'd been.
Really? That are still there today.
Oh, still there today, and it's surprising how many there could be.
And like stagecoach tracks is what you're talking about, or
well,
horse tracks?
Some of them are developed into the stagecoaches, and that it doesn't surprise me because there's always better routes to travel.
Mm-hmm.
We put roads in an area that is more appropriate than others, obviously. And so the wagons traveled that way too. And there was hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of wagons over the 3 years that it existed that went literally from clear back in Nebraska all the way to Virginia City on his trail. And so why did some of those tracks maintain themselves is because of, like what you mentioned, some of it was stagecoach routes. And so that was developed all the way from Virginia City, all the way literally to past Yellowstone, Livingston, Shields River, and then Hunter's Hot Springs, and that almost that entire area was developed. The stagecoach roads were developed off of the Bozeman Trail. But then yet the Bozeman Trail crosses the river at that location and goes into what we knew later to be on the actual reservation. And that was developed later. And then eventually went around the Bighorns and down towards Sheridan and south and went on around. Some of it is very indecipherable because of the fact that agriculture has been farmed, and so tracks are going to disappear. But sometimes on ridges where they went up and around, that due to the erosion and stuff, that it's helped to maintain the locations of where there's actually wagons traveled because they eroded out and kept it that way. So that's helped. But most of the areas that you can see are because of on the sloping terrain. There are some, amazingly so, that is on reasonably level ground and the tracks are still there, but not much. Not much. But it's been a fun study. So I spent 2 years on that, and we'll have about 40 maps, detailed maps, showing the location of the trail all the way through Montana.
How do you get involved in this? I mean, is it your reputation? Do they approach you? How do you work on the Bozeman Trail map? I didn't get a phone call. I never got a letter.
Well, it's background of my experiences and stuff in mapping, and then ended up working with the folks on Our Montana. And so they knew me and knew what my background was, so they'd ask if I would actually pursue something like that. But history is interesting, and I did a year study on the exact location of Fort Manuel Lisa's Fort Raymond.
I was going to ask you about Fort Raymond.
That was an interesting fort.
So where was that at?
it's down not too far from the mouth of the Bighorn River, just this side,
Mm.
and it's on an island. It's called Government Island, and it's on the north side of that Government Island, and the river has impacted it over time, having done a lot of work in regard to something that a lot of people don't understand the terminology, but as a fluvial geomorphologist, which means water and geo and earth, And so basically studying what has happened over the changes of time from the river and how, and you can then relate to where the river was back in 1807 and compared to what it is now. Because on the engineering work that I've done, that's one of the key things that we've had to do, was to do those kinds of studies on the history of the movement of the river. It was the same thing that we did when we found the canoe camp on the Yellowstone, where Clark was coming down, and that camp
Is that just south of Billings?
just south of Park City,
Oh, okay.
right on the river. It's on an island now, private property. It's broke up between two owners. And so because of the fact that it's not very accessible, people don't even plan on making it an historic site. And the latrine now, unfortunately, is gone. And that was one of the things that we were able to confirm, because they used, any smart man would never drink some of the things they drink, okay? And mercury was one of them. And so they had it in a fluid, and they would drink it, and they would then squirt it out and help. They felt like it would purge the body. And so now we had what we call a mercury vapor analyzer.
You were looking for old turds.
Yeah.
Old mercury turds from Lewis and Clark is how you found it?
And even playing with the dirt right there, And we were
One
digging.
man's trash, right?
Every 3 centimeters, about an inch and a half. Here you take another sample, and then you go down another 3, and you take another sample, and we found out the positive samples were about a foot deep. And we came up with confirmation that it was mercury. And then right next to it, right beside it, somebody had gone in to take a poop, and when he lowered down, he dropped a lead ball. And that lead ball, we found out, had the same isotope reading that the lead came from out of the same mine that the expedition got their mine. And there's lead at different mines can be tested differently.
That is unreal. You found a lead ball.
Yeah, I didn't personally. A friend of mine found it, but we found it during the research on it. And then we had the National Park Service took charge of pursuing the testing on it, and they had it done at a laboratory, and the isotope test proved to be the same lead. So that with the mercury, and we found then 289 or 90 feet from there to where we found the hearth where they cooked. And they were supposed to be roughly 300 feet apart. And it was within 10 feet. Can you believe? 10 feet is all it was off. And that was also supposed to be 300 feet from the river. Well, I was the first one to do the morphology study to find out where the river was in 1806, at that time, and compared to where it is now. And then with historic maps 150 years ago, and with his maps that he drew, we then designated a particular area where we would then go in with the sophisticated equipment like we're talking about. There was 3 different ones, and we're able to confirm that was the hearth. And actually, with the instruments, a magnetometer, we found exactly where they went from where they cooked right to where they made the boats. And back and forth, and it proved out exactly. And the map that they drew from it, the color was right distinct on it and everything. So, and that a lot of that has to do with the sophistication of the kinds of equipment. But you could walk on that, you have no idea that a foot down, that it was as dense as it was. And we had a soil densitometer too that, between the three of them, put all that together. You could find literally right where they camped, right where they walked, where they cooked, where they went to the bathroom. And so it's kind of neat to be there. I was there one day and found two pieces right in the hearth area that we found that came right from the expedition. That was just really neat. One was a little metal strap and some other items too that they believe associated with the expedition. But anyway, it's kind of fun to get involved in some of those old type studies.
Yeah.
I mean, just incredible all that's preserved. And just that.
Exactly.
Makes me want to start eating a little bit of mercury.
Leave your mark.
Leave my marks. People could
see if they can track where you're at.
See if they can track where I'm
at. Yeah.
So,
man,
it would have to look so different from like vegetation and stuff. Is it established? How, or is it sandbar, gravel?
Well, if the soil itself, proved out to be, and the very first day we got there, because I had laid it out as to where to do the study. Okay, then we took the landowners out there and we looked for a cut bank, and we wanted from that cut bank, we wanted to know exactly what the soil was from the surface all the way down. Because if we found out that it was sand and fluvial material type soil right on the surface, I can tell you right now, you're not going to find anything. It has been buried by the river and cut out and buried again, and it's long gone. But when we got there, we found out that it was native vegetation that had been, there was probably 18 inches or more, more than that. It was almost 2 foot of actual soil that had been built up over time that was natural from all the vegetation that died, the grass and everything that builds soil over time. And that's why we found everything that we found was a foot deep. That's how much soil had been developed in 200 years. It was a foot in that area. So that's the first thing we had to be positive of. What was the soil that we were looking at? It had to not be alluvial soils, or otherwise we knew we wouldn't have a chance. So once we found that, then we could go ahead and put the instruments out there and go to work. And it's all fun.
That's really cool.
Like a snapshot in history.
Yeah, almost like a private investigator going back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like a cold case.
Cold case.
It's a cold case, is right. Yeah.
Is there any other things you're working on or that interest you that, mysteries, or maybe some other locations where Lewis and Clark might have been, or some other, figures in history?
I spent some time studying the methodology that they used when they did all of their surveying and mapping on the expedition. I went back to how they actually went through the process of doing what they did and how they come up with what they come up with. And that was a very, very intense 18-month study that sometimes 6 to 10 hours a day. And so I put out a little booklet on that methodology that they used. And so there's just little things on the side you get involved in and working on, and it's always fun.
So you make maps under what name?
The business name is Rocky Mountain Surveys.
And how'd you come up with that name?
Well, my wife's name is Marlene. My first name I go by is Ralph, even though it's Leonard. And so a friend of mine says, "Well, use those initials. Why don't you call it RMS and Rocky Mountain Surveys?" So a friend of mine suggested it, and we've used that. We had to have some kind of a business name.
Yeah.
And I was still working full time for an engineering company, and so it wasn't like I could just spend all my time doing this. So instead, I spent 4 or 5 hours a night from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning every night for a few years.
So did you just come home and say, "Hey, honey, I decided I'm making maps now"?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she put up with it, and, but we kept other life going, and coached baseball in the summer for the kids, and I still coached at the rifle club, and that has been a really something I've been involved with for 50 years at this club alone right here in Billings. And
Which one's that?
the Yellowstone Rifle Club.
Yellowstone Rifle Club.
And I still coach 4 nights a week, and during most of the year, partially off in the summer, and then sometimes travel with the kids on rifle trips, but not as much as I used to. We've had a lot of successful shooters. One of the girls that I coached went in high school and went to L.A. with her in the '84 Olympics and stood right behind her as she shot and watched her win the Olympic gold. And so it's really neat to be involved in the lives of some other people that are really extremely talented. And so it's more or less a being, in their lives. And some of the kids at that age and older that I still talk with on a weekly, monthly basis, just because they, were so involved for so long. They're still family. We had 2 girls that just won state championships, and both of them set national records 2 weeks ago in a match. So we got kids coming on again, and so it's nice to have the opportunity to be with other people that are, to me, just like family, to be with kids that excel like that.
Man, Ralph, I could sit and talk to you for hours on end, and I don't think I could get enough. You just, man, some of the stuff you must have done and seen, it seems like you're doing it right.
Well, I don't know why God hasn't called me home yet. That's the only little book that I've written on myself is that's what my Marlene entitled it. Is because of all my close calls in life and near-death experiences, and just there's dozens of them. I don't know how many people have ever been pulled into an actual hay baler
and lived
and survived. And when that thing was plunging and cutting that hay as it's pushing that hay back out there, and I got caught in the teeth and pulled in, and the auger was pushing me into that big stroke, and the engine died 1 stroke before my feet went in.
What?
It never died any time I ever bailed. I was only 13, 14 at the time, but I'd never had it die. And it died 1 stroke before my feet were the next one's coming in and went, it died. You don't think somebody's looking out for you?
Definitely for you. Yeah. I mean, dang.
I've had the same kind of a near accident with every piece of machinery in the farm I ever drove. And so I sometimes don't know why I'm here.
Well, you had to share I think someone told you.
Yeah, they did.
Right? I think you've had that answer.
Yeah. So I guess he still wants me around for something. I don't know.
If there was one piece of advice that you could give for people, and I'm not excluded from this, but people that are looking at getting into doing more of this backcountry stuff, what would it be? I know that's kind of a broad question, but
It all depends on the person, obviously. I love the mountains as much or more as any place on earth. It was just something that was a calling to me to be in the mountains. And so everybody's got their own calling to some extent. And you got to have to follow that. And hunting, we love to hunt. And we just felt like that was a calling to some extent. I don't hunt or fish much anymore now at this point, but it just depends on what strikes you, what your feeling is. Follow through it, but get the help from above in anything you do.
well, thank you very much for coming on, Ralph.
Really
Well,
appreciate
I really
it.
do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And if you're up for it, I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Well, I'm so proud of you all with this. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, mapping to me is easy. I couldn't even think about how I can do what you're doing. And
If I showed you, I don't think you'd be as impressed. I think you'd catch on pretty quick.
oh, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ralph, for coming on. I really did appreciate you picking up and answering and wanting to come on. And I would love to hear more of your stories, but
Oh boy.
I think we'd have to do it. We got to do it in a couple sessions.
Bill, I'd say so.
But I'll keep feeding you. You come over, I'll keep feeding you if you keep telling stories. We might even be able to get your brother on if he wants to tell some of his near-death stuff.
I'll tell you, my brother, his experience is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that would be really cool.
I'm just kind of speechless. I mean, everything that we talked about.
Well, you have stories of stuff that I want to do and experience. So it's very humbling, but also hopeful because, somebody who's done it is sitting right in front of me. And that's pretty cool. Really cool. But
Time will kick you there.
yeah.
Time will take you there.
All right.
Like I said, I'm speechless. I just want to thank you again, Ralph, for coming on. I mean, just hearing you talk and even how you found your purpose to make maps has been inspiring.
Well, thank you. I'm just so impressed with all your environment, with your hunting and your. Oh my gosh! It's absolutely impressive.
Well, thank you very much, Ralph. Make sure to check us out. We'll be up on Instagram. We'll be up on YouTube Shorts. We have a website up. You can look. We do have a new merch shirt hanging in the back, if you can see it. It's one of my brother's designs for Bovasin Outdoors. I'm also wearing the shirt from last week, I guess.
We also have been fishing a couple times, so there'll be some new content coming out on Instagram, TikTok, and we also YouTube now. We started uploading some of our shorts, so just be sure to check that out.
Yes, sir. And until next time, Ralph, we'll be surviving the week
To live on the weekends.